Perfect. Again, welcome to the grant updates info session for fiscal year 2025. Joining me here, I'm of course Miranda Late, the grants manager here at the Lake Region Arts Council. I'm joined today by Dr. Timothy Wollenstein, PhD. He's going to say hello.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be with you today.
Wonderful. And so let's go ahead and jump right in. We are going to have time at the end for questions and answers, as well as some chatting, brainstorming, collaborating, sharing. So we'll go ahead and move through these updates fairly quickly, but and I'll ask that you write down any questions you have and save them for the end, and we'll go ahead and address them at that point. Before we launch into those changes, though, I would like to acknowledge that this activity and much of what LRAC does is made possible by the voters of Minnesota, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. So we give credit to Legacy where credit is due, and to you guys as well for voting it in. Wonderful. Well, I'm super excited to share with you the updates we have today. Some really hopefully impactful things this year as far as changes to a couple of workflow things, how some eligibility things, etc. So to start with, we've got a couple of updates that are going to apply to all of our grant programs. So this is applicable to individuals, to organizations, across the board in all of our grant programs. These two things are that one, staff may introduce any corrected application materials, clarify information, or provide supplementary information between the time the board receives grant application packets and the review meeting. This came about as one of the further efforts that we are making to be able to make sure that we get applications to our board members as complete as possible, so that we avoid having anything thrown out being due to being incomplete or being found ineligible because something was missing. So this is yet another layer of protection for you guys, the applicant, in order to be able to have your application considered by the board and hopefully get funded. The second thing that is going to apply to everybody, this is a little bit more of a admin thing, but just a heads up so you know. In the past, we've been sending out hard copy letters whenever there are decisions made. Moving forward, we are not going to be doing that anymore. If that's something that would affect your organization negatively, let me know. But overall, across the board, we won't be sending those notification letters. We will still be sending if you get funded and checks come in the mail and such, you will still get a hard copy letter at that point. But again, that initial notification letter telling you whether or not you've gotten the grant will no longer be sent via hard copy. You will just receive that notification via email. Great. The next two changes are fairly short ones, but impactful in their own ways. The first concerns the project grant. Organizations, this is one for you guys. This is the grant that is up to $3,000 to do some kind of one and done type project. So performances, exhibits, etc., where the project is self-contained, and when it's done kind of a thing. You may know that prior to COVID, the 20% match was a thing. With COVID, the board suspended it. Last year, in fiscal year 2024, the board opted to bring it back. After having done that for a year, we went back to the drawing board just a little bit. We noticed that 20% cash match was proving a little bit of a, not a deterrent necessarily, but definitely making things a challenge for people. So we have done a slight revision on that. So it is still a 20% cash match of the grant expenses amount that the applicant needs to provide. However, it now is going to be capped at $600. And the reason for that number is because 20% of $3,000, which is the max amount you can apply for is $600. So that is to alleviate some of the pressure on our organizations, especially our smaller organizations that tend to go for those smaller grants. Next, we have a change that concerns the individual legacy grant and who can apply for it. Off the bat, this might not look like much of a change at all. The change is that artists are eligible to apply regardless of their tax status, LLC, 501c3, sole proprietor, or no tax supporting status. If this doesn't sound like it's any kind of a change, that's probably because it didn't affect you, which is great. But it was a clarification that arose as we looked at some of the language concerning for-profit entities and how that relates to individual artists, especially those who are running their art as business and have registered as such, and how that conflicted with some of our language regarding grants not funding for-profit entities. So we are now, if you are an individual, regardless of whether or not you are running your art through an LLC or whatever tax status you have, you now are eligible to apply for our legacy individual grant. So again, hopefully a change that makes life easier for our applicants. And a shout out here, I did not go through and credit all of the artists, but if you want to know, let me know at the end or shoot me an email. I know off the top of my head, this is a lovely illustration by Jack Sprose of Alexandria. Great. Diving into some of the kind of more technical things. This is one that I'm really excited about, also a change that will hopefully make life easier for all of our applicants. A new personnel documentation option. We've kind of been soft running this the last couple of years, but now we've got it codified into the guidelines, and it does apply to project grants, legacy organization grants, as well as legacy individual grants. And the update is that if you are using the grant to pay for personnel, if personnel cannot be identified yet, you can provide a detailed job description in lieu of a letter of commitment and resume and such. So especially for kind of those non-specific personnel, like, you're going to have to hire a piano player, or, you're going to need a lighting specialist or a sound specialist, and you don't necessarily know exactly who that is yet, but you can get someone, or you want to hire someone. You can, instead of having to track down a letter of commitment and a resume and everything, provide a detailed job description instead. I'll put a personal asterisk on that, just from wanting to let you guys know how to make the best application you can. Our board always does love to see more detail, so this is something you can do. However, I would caution you not to go ham with it, because they would like you to still make efforts to identify, especially those key personnel. If you want a specific painter, make sure you still get the letter of commitment from a certain painter. Don't just put the job description. Great. The next thing is, I'm going to just skim over really quick. It essentially is also just a clarification. It doesn't really change anything that we've been doing right now. And that is that, oops. Come back. Sorry, guys. There we go. Okay. And that is that our legacy award has a fiscal year cap, which is 50% of an applicant's yearly operating budget income in LRAC funding per LRAC fiscal year. I'm not going to really go into much more detail than that. If you think it applies to you, please come talk to me. That only applies to legacy organization grants. So if you're an individual or you're an organization that's not planning to apply for a legacy grant, don't worry about it. Otherwise, if that sounds like something you might need to pay attention to, give me a call. Perfect. The next change is, again, one that is more of a clarification rather than anything that's going to significantly change how anyone applies. But I do just want to make, especially our arts organizations to whom this applies, aware that this is something that has been updated this fiscal year. And this is a definition update of what constitutes an arts organization in the eyes of the Lake Region Arts Council. So our updated definition of arts organizations are that arts organizations are a 501c3 with the arts as a primary focus, demonstrated by having 60% of the programming being focused on the arts. The most recent financial annual report must have 60% of the total operating expenses dedicated to arts activities and arts-related expenses. And the organization must have at least one public arts event or project per applicant's most recently completed fiscal year. So again, this is plays into the project grants, legacy organization grants, and probably the place where this would maybe come up the most is going to be operating support grants. These criteria need to be met in order to be considered an arts organization. All right, this is a really exciting one. And I bet that some of my arts organizations people are going to cheer. We have gotten, our board has graciously evaluated and approved an update to how we handle our LRAC annual revenue and expenses report, aka the 2-year look back for project and legacy organization grants. So I know that a lot of you are very familiar with this report. You fill it out every year, updating it with your 2 most recent fiscal years worth of information and plugging it in and trying to get everything to fit and match and line up, and it can be a little bit of a headache. I'm pleased to announce that arts organizations and nonprofit organizations that are not arts organizations are required to submit an LRAC annual revenue and expenses report for their 2 most recently completed fiscal years. That's not the exciting part. The exciting part is that organizations receiving operating support from either MSAB or LRAC are now exempt from providing this report for project and legacy organization grants. So in other words, rather than having to do it every year and submitting it with the project and legacy grants anytime you submit one, now you're only going to have to do it if you are applying for LRAC operating support. And if you are an MSAB recipient, then you won't have to do it at all. We trust that they've vetted you thoroughly enough, and when you apply to us for operating support, we vet you pretty thoroughly. So this is one way that we as an organization are trying to show our trust in our arts organizations in our LRAC region, that we trust you to go out and do the work, and we're not having to peer as in depth to those kind of minutia as frequently. So hopefully that again is something that makes your lives a lot easier and your bookkeeper's happy, and and all of us getting that. So again, that exemption is if you are receiving operating support from either MSAB or LRAC. If you are an arts organization that is not receiving operating support from either one of us, you will still need to do that 2-year look back form. Okay, and then another exciting one. This is one that I'm personally very, very excited about. In the past, we've had a little bit of a gap between our individual legacy grants and our organization grants. And where that gap was concerning groups of 2 or more artists. They couldn't apply for the individual grant because that's for individuals, and they couldn't apply for the organization grant unless they got a 501c3 nonprofit to apply on their behalf. I am pleased to announce that while individuals still cannot apply for the individual artist legacy grant on behalf of a group of artists, such as a musical act, acting ensemble, or literacy group, starting this year, groups of 2 or more artists having a history of performing together and or performing under a recognized name who don't wish to become a 501c3 may apply for legacy organizational grant if they secure a fiscal agent that is a federally designated 501c3 tax exempt organization registered in Minnesota in the LRAC region. So in other words, if you have a group that you've gotten together with in the past and you've maybe thought about wanting to do a tour or go play a certain festival or something, and you haven't been able to because you can't all apply for individual grants, and you can't find an organization that wants to use their one chance at an application to write it on your behalf, there is now an option for you to apply for an organizational grant with a fiscal agent. And we do have a few organizations that have expressed a willingness to be fiscal agents. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, definitely give me a call. I'd be happy to connect you with some of those groups that might be willing to be your fiscal agent. We do also have that definition of an artist group, defined as a group of artists having a history of performing together and or performs under a recognized name, not a group that comes together for a one-time project and then disbands. So that is, we've closed that gap in where all types of groups and organizations and individuals and such can now apply to our LRAC grants. So we hope that that's a really exciting update for some of you as well. And even if that doesn't apply to you, if you know of anyone who maybe hasn't applied for a grant because they didn't think they would fit, maybe invite them to revisit that. They might find we've got a place for them now. Wonderful. And that actually brings us, that only took 20 minutes, to our brainstorming and question section. So before we dive into the questions I have posted on the screen, I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and let's take any questions related to what I just covered specifically, these updates and changes. And then I'll go ahead and stop the recording and we can have just kind of a more open conversation about some of these questions, what you're working on, any grant or which of these grant changes might impact you or your organization. I want to hear if you're excited about this. And then this is an opportunity too. We've got quite a few different organizations here. So if there's anything that you'd maybe like to partner with another person or organization on, or any questions about LRAC grants, we'll have some time to dive into some of that. So again, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen for a minute here, and I'll take any questions about the grant changes we just covered. Feel free to come off mute and just ask away or throw it in the chat if that's something that is preferable to you.
Great changes, Miranda. This is Michael Culleton with the Choral Artists and Concordia College. Thanks for a great rundown. I wrote a note about that legacy award not being more than 50% of applicants' yearly budget. Sounds like that might be kind of a rare situation. Am I right that would be rarer than common?
Yes, Michael, that would be something that we would probably not run into most of the time. And where that comes about is actually on behalf of some of the Minnesota State Arts Board regulations and such. For these legacy funds, essentially, we just want to make sure we are not completely running any single organization solely off of legacy funds. So it is probably pretty rare that we would run into that, but again, it's something that got updated for this year. So wanted to make everyone aware.
I had two other thoughts too as we were going through. First of all, I want to thank LRAC for that grace period without the 20% match. Probably very beneficial for all sorts of organizations, and not a backbreaker to see that 20% match comes back. So thanks for the grace period on that. And then also thanks for the personal documentation option. There just sometimes are those grants where I can't name every violin player that we're going to hire just yet. And so that's a great way to handle that. And I appreciate that. Thanks for the continued work, Miranda. You're doing a great job. Hello, Tim. Welcome to LRAC.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that feedback. Any other questions or comments about the grant changes? Otherwise, again, we'll move into the kind of the more relaxed, laid back portion of the info session today. And again, for anyone who's joining late, this portion of the session has been recorded. Right now it's only looking to be less than half an hour, so I will send out that recording to everyone who registered after the fact if you joined later, want to revisit this later. Okay, well, hearing no additional questions, and of course, if you do think of something at 2 in the morning, feel free to email me. I'm happy to address them outside of the session as well. I'm gonna go ahead and end the recording. So again, thank you for attending this info session for those people watching the recording in the future here.